Okay, good. Attorney Walter Hnot here, the most viewed, subscribed to and clicked on disability attorney in America. Now, here's basically the thing that I want to go through with this actual topic. When we first did videos about aliens, UFOs, the future technologies that they could potentially give us that would help disabled, people made a lot of fun of me. They were acting like clowns in the comment section, and it was fine. I didn't really get offended by it that much, but it's at the end of the day, it was a little hurtful. It was a little hurtful. But now I can say this: America has officially had congressional hearings. They just released a big film, a feature film called The Age of Disclosure, which is where they, in fact, now at the federal government level, using official government employees, have stated, number one, that they have crashed ships. Number two, they have organics from those crashed ships. Number three, they basically have reverse engineered quite a bit of technology. Number four, the amount of crash ships that they're now talking about has increased significantly. I think it was like 300 plus in a single year. And additionally, they have talked about essentially the technology that's used with how these ships actually travel. And what it is that there's a bubble around it where space-time is manipulated, and it can easily travel through water, easily travel through the air, etc., whereas the ship inside the bubble is not interacting with our atmosphere, our logistics of our planet. And so then I come to question, will America, as it becomes a space-faring civilization, as we continue to study and learn from these organics people, well, aliens that they find in these spaceships, will we still want to go ahead and have disabled that we pay for through these programs, a FICA tax? Or will we be able to cure them? Will we be able to remove their limitations? How's all that going to work? And so the first question I have for our guest, and if he'd be so kind as to go ahead and introduce himself with this, is the first question is the United States holding back a bunch of technology that we can't see, but they're actually using? Like, are we already a spacefaring race, a spacefaring American people? And I want to get his take on it. Let's go to him right now.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Walter, and I've talked about these extraterrestrial UFO things on many occasions. Got into it when I was a little kid, 80 years old now, so I've been around a while, and I've seen things progress. And I listened to the talk shows, the movie the other night, and I don't think there's any doubt we know theoretically how to take ET home. I think we could take ET home, but building a ship that's going to work that way is another it's another act other than just the theoretical constructs. Because when you look at our space program, when you look at our aviation, by the way, I was an aviation attorney for 50 years, but when you look at these programs, all we're doing is moving air molecules through an engine to give us some sort of thrust, a wing to give us some sort of lift. I mean, that's really kind of Jurassic Park. And we're not really seeing any of this advanced technology out there because I assure you, the aliens aren't playing around with air molecules. They're working with space-time concepts that are really at the cutting edge of our physics that maybe we're just getting into now to remotely understand how the space-time warp bubble works around their ship and why they can go through water at several hundred miles an hour. Doesn't matter what medium they go through because they're not seeing it. They can make a right turn, a left turn, stop short, reverse, because they don't feel a thing, because they're isolated from the outside environment totally. So I think we're getting there. Now, are we a space race? Well, no, I don't think we are. I think we're getting there. I think we're in our infancy at the very best. We've been to the moon, so I guess on some level that qualifies us as that. But are we flittering about the different planets, the different moons, the different galaxies, this kind of thing? No, we're not even close to that. One thing that we could do, of course, is start owning up And as we've begun to do, indicate that, maybe some extraterrestrials are here. Maybe we're seeing them. Yeah, we all know they're here. We're all taking pictures of them. My goodness, it's all over the place. We see pictures of them. So it's nothing new. And what I'll talk about in a little while is the fact that the ETs, they're not these extraterrestrial, otherworldly intelligences and that. They're our brothers and sisters. Look, they hybridized with us. We're part of them. We're related to them. They were probably here long before we were. I mean, I think that's pretty clear from the development of our brain in the last 50,000 years. That something gave us a kick in the pants. I mean, evolution takes much longer. And besides, like I've always said, if it was evolution, why aren't elephants building houses? No, they selected us, they hybridized with us, and they moved us ahead very, very quickly. Yes, I've heard the arguments that we went by the ocean. Some of us ate shellfish for protein. The brain grew on and on and on and on. Maybe the elephants just didn't eat enough shellfish. No, let's face it. They're not these foreigners. And I do want to get into a talk a little bit about in a little while about how the government is introducing us to the concept that the ETs were there and how they're going to do it in a very, very structured manner.
Okay, so here's my thing. When I watched the video, it absolutely stunned me. When they talked about the hurdles of how they were creating UAP programs and how they discovered the legacy program and how basically they had to go through the Department of Defense to go ahead and pull this information, it shocked me. And I always knew that there was something out there. It would be incredibly egotistical for me to believe that in the endless universe, the endless cosmos, all the superclusters, that we were the only thing. Like, that's just moronic. Like, any person that believes that is completely removed from sanity. To believe that you are the only existing thing that existed, evolved in the universe is horrific. But still, to see the federal government actually release documentation on it, actually come clean on it, was a huge shock to me. Were you shocked that the government held hearings, had senators present, had House reps present, actually dug deep, actually made people from these programs under oath answer to these things? Were you surprised when they actually told us some of the truth?
No, I was not surprised at all. It's sort of, what took them so long? They're going to have to explain how it's been swept under the carpet for so long and why they swept it under the carpet, but they'll move through that. But they're coming out in a very structured, a very organized way. But you got to put yourself in their shoes. Let's take a guy like Trump. He knows all about this. Don't listen to what he tells you he doesn't know or he's not interested. I don't think he's ever said he didn't know. I think he said he's just not interested in it. And he's got a lot on his plate, and so he's a busy guy. But put yourself in his shoes. They come to you. They tell you about all this stuff that's here. We've got this technology. We've got the aliens living amongst us. We're hybridized, all this and all that. Now, he's a businessman, and he's a very good one. So he's going to have to sit back and think how this is going to be introduced very slowly, very organized, very, 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 very thought out. Because how is this going to affect the economy? How is this going to affect us politically, emotionally, physically, mentally, on and on and on and on. He's got to think these things through, because you just can't throw technology into a group that's way behind. The technology isn't going to be meaningful and could disrupt them and cause, all kinds of economic damage to industries. I mean, just imagine if you came out with a UFO energy propulsion system. And notice I use the word UFO. If some of you like the UAP concept, we'll talk about that too. But just imagine if they came out with this, what this energy source would do to the fossil fuel industry. Now, we all would like to see the fossil fuel industry go by the wayside for pollution and everything else. But you got to do it slowly, because it becomes very disruptive, and you can't have the fossil fuel industry going broke overnight. That's not going to work. So you've got to do this slowly, and you got to do it in an organized manner. And I think Trump's probably the guy that's going to have to do it because he's in for at least what, another 3 years more. He's going to have to come out with it. And, but, you know, it's going to have to be structured. I would have been very impressed with this movie the other night had they just gone a little bit further. You know, everything we've seen so far is really third party, you know, who said, he said, this said that. And even in my investigations in the past, talking to guys like Len Stringfield, Stanton Friedman, we all talked about it. They all know we don't have a ray gun that we can show you. They got everything. The best I think I got was from Stanton Friedman before he passed away a few years back. Was that he said to me, Walter, we have some things that have come out in industry. For instance, he danced around the transistor being reverse engineered when that first came out. He danced about fiber optics coming from the UFO. But the one that really blew my socks off was Velcro. He said that actually came from a crash craft. And okay, I mean, I was surprised. I mean, there's got to be more than that, though. And the other night, I would have been very happy if they came out with something more and maybe presented us with something. And if you really want to make an impact, get one of the ETs to come forth and join you with the science community. Imagine that. Have one of them present. And it's going to come to that sooner or later. I'd like to see an ET. I'd like to see a smoking ray gun.
I feel like that would be too much too fast, though. Like, to be fair with this situation, me watching that video, they gave up so much information. They told us and brought forward so much in those hearings under oath that I was shocked. You know, the first thing that my brain went to was World War II, you know, when Germany was going into the occult and studying all these ancient cultures and ancient technologies and creating the bell and the first jet, and how they were just vastly beyond where everybody else was, largely because of their German and Jewish Ashkenazi-based cultures, that it just made me very quickly realize that, you know, it's one of those things. It's like the moment you hear it and the moment they tell you, yeah, we have the ships. Yeah, we have biological tissue and biological beings. Yes, we have those. The moment that happened, my brain jumped forward massively to like connect all these pieces. And it was a little upsetting, to be fair. For me, I guess I want to tell you a quote, because this is a quote that's now become more and more famous. And it's an old quote, and it really is quite interesting. The quote came from Ben Rich. He was the successor to Kelly Johnson. And Kelly Johnson was the first lead, person for the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works program, which, if you guys know what Skunk Works is, they basically do a lot of black box technology. It's technology where essentially, anti-gravity, specialty elements that are not on our charts, force fields, laser, this, that, whatever, essentially the future of technology, right? Interstellar travel. Now, Ben Rich, back in 1993, so like not recently, not 2025, 2024, 2023, not recently. In 1993, he stated, and there's multiple versions of his quote. Here's the first one. This is from his speech. We already have, quote, the means to travel among the stars, but these technologies are so locked up in black projects that it would take an act of God to ever get them out into the public domain to benefit humanity. Another quote, we now have the technology to take ET home. Okay. Rich allegedly said this as his closing remarks at the same 1993 event. Anything you can imagine, we already know how to do. Another quote of his. A final quote from basically Rich's book, Skunk Works, co-authored with Leo Janis, 1994. Quote, we already have the technology that could take ET home. What is holding it up is that it is locked up in black programs and it would take an act of God to ever get it out. And until then, we just have to do the best we can with what we have. So I guess my question to you is, now that we know not only in the most recent report that they came out with, which is just recent, was that there was over 300 ships that had been, going to our military stations and, turning on our nuclear devices and turning them off without our being able to go ahead and stop them. There were over 300 recently reported. It sounds like we already have the technology. There was another quote where he said, we know how to use it. We just haven't figured out all of the math. We know what the math problem is. So I guess my question to you is, it sounds political. It sounds like the political problem where they don't want to release it, but it sounds like we could be, as a human race, vastly better than we currently are. We could potentially have people live to 300 years. We could potentially cure, grow, whatever a disabled person would need to get their life back on track. So I guess my question to you is, I understand the economic argument, but now that this has happened, and remember, Trump created Space Force for a reason. Like that didn't, that was an expensive change from, Air Force to Space Force. Considering that Trump is likely to go ahead and push this thing forward, what do you think Trump will do going forward?
Well, again, let's put ourselves in his shoes. I'm sure this is something he'd rather pass on, because he does have a rather full plate. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think the timing is such that we're going to have to come out with this stuff. And remember, with all due respect to Ben Rich, the Skunk Works, they came out with the U-2, the SR-71, and this and that. And these new spy planes that are radar proof, that kind of thing. They've done a lot of good. But if you notice one thing about everything they've come out with, they're still pushing air molecules around to get thrust, to get lift, and do whatever. It's still air molecule time. And we're not seeing even the remotest inkling of this advanced technology that's supposed to be locked up. And I'm sure theoretically we know how the ETs are doing it, but converting it from theory to the laboratory, beta type, that kind of thing, getting it out there in the field, I mean, that's a little tricky. We're still driving around Tesla vehicles that are lucky if you get 300 miles when it's all said and done. You go 300 miles, you better be coasting into a charging station. But we're still in our infancy here. Now, could we have a better life if a lot of this technology came out? Clearly we could, but you got to bring it out in an organized way and over time. And I think they're beginning to do that now. This movie the other night's kind of thing. I think it could have been done a lot better. It was sort of redundant over and over and over, telling us, I think, what we all already know. And that's fine. But I think it's time, Donald Trump, to introduce us to someone. I think it's time to show us something that is outside hovering indefinitely. It's a tough call for Donald, and I don't envy him in that regard, but he's going to have to do it. He's going to have to take the next step. We've third-partied this till we're blue in the face. He said this, she said that, so forth and so forth. Okay, guys, now tell us something we don't know.
I guess my big thing is this. I know the technology that's going to end Social Security disability benefits completely. I'm fully aware of that. And the technology is that basically they will be able to take your consciousness out of your body and put it into an avatar. And you will be able to live in that avatar, that new body, and that new body will be you. The genetics in that body, the DNA, they could copy, paste, fix, whatever, but they'll be able to fix mental and physical impairments in that new body. Hyper extreme anxiety, they'll be able to fix it. Trauma to the body from a car accident, they'll be able to fix it. So I guess when I look at this, these aliens, right? Some of them fly around, some of them crash, because to be fair, it's probably different species and they probably have different technologies. But the main thing that we've now with our sensors been able to see is that they have this time-space warp bubble around them and that they exist in this thing. So let's say these two bubbles collided. We have a Roswell effect, right? We collect these bodies. To me, that would be like a classic car crash. But to them, if this happened, in my opinion, they would just have another body ready to transfer their consciousness into that new body. Do you feel like that is a technology that people will accept if they are in a horrible traumatic experience, or they've had lifelong depression, schizophrenia, anxiety, bipolar, hearing voices? Do you feel like this is something America and the disabled population are ready for?
Well, unless you have a death wish, I think you're going to embrace this new technology. I mean, let's face it. Death is not this finality that we've been brought up to believe. Death is a reset where you're put back into something, you're brought back, you've got your consciousness, and everything is back in very quickly. So we come back, we're reborn, and we're given a sort of an amnesia situation, because they don't necessarily in the reset want us remembering everything, which is probably good, because we're not the most peaceful group around, and our biggest problem is getting along with each other, if anyone's noticed that. But anyway, death being a reset like that, that must mean that they have the technology. And when I think back to the Roswell crash of 47, I don't know, don't quote me. I think four of the aliens died in that, and one lived for 6 weeks or something like that. Whatever. The four that died, I would be willing to bet were back in operation by week's end. And they brought their consciousness along with them. So the consciousness can be carried over, and you can put it in a variety of bodies. That's not difficult at that level of technology. Now, would people want that? Well, you can always give people an option. You can be brought back into a new body if you're really in that bad a condition. You can be healed in your present situation. You can pick a number of years you want to live, and you can do a suicide if you want to. I mean, it's your choice. It doesn't matter. But you have to remember that death is not this finality. It's a reset, and they've got this technology. They do it, and it's something we have to look forward to. And I wouldn't worry about Social Security, as they say, running out of money in the future, because with these technologies coming out, Social Security is not going to run out of money. They're going to run out of customers, recipients, because people won't be needing it. You'll be productive. You'll want to do things. You're not going to age like we do now.
So I guess my big thing is this, when I look at this situation, I say to myself, okay, so, technologies that could make people live to 300, technologies that could make people live to 400 years old, or potentially live forever. It destroys Social Security retirement, because, obviously at that point, why would you have retirement if the person can live and work and do this forever? But then when you have artificial intelligence, and then when you have basically AI with robots, and the AI and robots are doing all the work, and AI is able to go ahead and build new programs, build new systems, build new futures. At that point, I guess my question becomes, I mean, why would we have any disabled? You're always going to get people that have a religious perspective to this, of okay, would God allow this? Everybody's got a different version of their God, Christian God, Jewish God, Muslim God, etc. But I guess from my perspective with this, looking at it at a more, from the outside looking in, to me, it does not make sense to have trauma victims continue as trauma victims. It's the classic thing. Look at Elon and the chip that's being implanted into people's brains, and the chip is allowed to go ahead and interact with computer systems at levels that have never before been seen. And it's the precursor to creating mind mapping technology that will not allow a person who is a quadriplegic to be a quadriplegic in the future. It's the beginning of that step where we cure quadriplegics. So my question to you is, this technology, this future, obviously these aliens, they have ships that connect and they have problems and they crash. And they now, and the government has admitted at the federal level, at the highest level of the government, that basically they have a legacy program that exists to collect ships that have crashed, that have come down. So my question then is, obviously, their bodies can be destroyed. And I've seen technology, I've seen the new technology where supercomputers using quantum capabilities can literally store everything that's on the internet and transfer it in less than a second. So with that kind of computing power and that kind of storage ability, I guess the question for me is there's no limitation to them storing a person, who they are, their thoughts, their dreams, their electrical signals, their memory capacity. They can store that in a supercomputer. They can create a crystal that has all of that person's being in the sense of what their brain has, maybe not their soul, but what their brain has. So do you feel like people will be willing to, obviously the older generation is going to be more religious, but do you feel that people will be willing to, if something happens, take the first steps to transition their, crystal generated mind? And I mean, I can just see the future. People will have their brain backed up at the end of each day onto a crystal. Do you think future generations will be willing to go ahead and step into an avatar? And what do you think are the problems that the United States would face, the medical community would face, and take into consideration, and this is the important part, assuming they actually have an organic, a being, they put them on TV, we see them, we talk to them, we interact with them, we get to ask them questions. How will that change everything? Because the reality is that there's an entire secret hidden book section that the Pope has access to, which is rumored to have access to some of this information. We know religious leaders know about this stuff. So I guess to me asking, what do you think are the problems with people getting there, and how do you think the industries will react to it?
Well, I always say true change comes about with generational change. The old die off, the young come up, they're more accepting of these things, and so forth and so forth. And I've kind of carried that over to some neat little thought that with every funeral, there's a little change. And I think that's true. It's the old thing. You can't teach old dogs new tricks, that kind of thing. Those sayings came about for a reason because they were probably true. But with regard to a lot of these things, the change is coming, and you can't jam it down people's throats. Give them the option. Look, if you've got a disability or something and you don't want to do this for whatever reason, don't do it. It's not going to be mandatory. At some point you'll get old, you'll pass, and the change will occur. The younger generation coming up, they're not going to want to suffer. I wouldn't want to suffer. I'd certainly take a look at these changes. You want to make sure it's a positive change. Sometimes the cure can be worse than the problem. You want to make sure that this is a good thing. But if you're in an accident or you're hurt or this or that, the consciousness should be transferable. They always say the consciousness is transferable, and that the body itself is the hardware, which is replaceable. So the consciousness then becomes the software, which you can upload, and our understanding of consciousness will grow. And I don't think it's such a massive problem. I did write a thesis one time on attaining universal awareness to the body of internet knowledge that's out there in the universe. And I call it the universal internet, the internet of the universe, where everything has probably been done before. And anything you do is just reinventing the wheel, so to speak. And when you go to solve a problem and it flashes the solution into your mind, I think you're actually tuning into that. So I think that has a lot to do with consciousness, our ability to tune in to what's already there. Whether you want to call it universal awareness, the universal internet, whatever label you want to put on it, it's there. And we have that ability to get it. And I have often been a beneficiary of that, where it comes into your mind in a nanosecond. And the interesting thing about that nanosecond is it's got a mass of information along with it, something that you could never do with a telephone or something like that. And of course, that brings me back to my beliefs in telepathy, mind-to-mind communication, where language is irrelevant and you're trading thoughts. And if you want to think of it as a picture that you're transferring to someone else, a picture in itself can be worth 1,000 words. We all know that saying. The other thing I want to touch on that the question just came up was why, if these space beings are so advanced, why do they crash? Well, there's some old expressions out there. I think you know what they are. Things happen. And these ships have a variety of technology in them. And I think probably a problem, being an aviator myself, comes when you so-called take it off the autopilot and start flying it manually. That's where the problem occurs. Okay, you're kind of circumventing all the abilities of the craft, and you're going into a manual mode, and that depends on your abilities. And we know there's many races coming here, so they're going to have different levels of technology. They're going to have different experience and levels, and the training. I'm sure these things aren't the easiest thing to fly. You got to be on top of them. And let's compound things with a thunderstorm. Let's compound things with lightning. Let's have two of you up there, and let's have a midair. Happens all the time to us. Why shouldn't it happen to them? I don't care how advanced you are.
So I guess from my perspective, it was shocking to me, and it shouldn't have been, because I knew all along that there had to be something else out there beyond us. Then when I saw the footage in the feature film where they were showing like what they were able to capture, what the new sensors were able to see, how the ships actually worked, the testimony from the pilots, the testimony from the program leaders, they're at the gates of the last people that hold the keys to what can be released. And that's the legacy program, what it's called. And the legacy program cut off all communication with the officials that had been investigating this. And now they're being forced to come out and talk about it. And I guess what I'm getting at is, retirement benefits, when this new technology comes out and people live much longer, the greatest evidence to me, and I mean, this may sound stupid to some people, but the greatest evidence to me is that we know there's something astronomical that's going to be coming out, something mind-blowing that's going to be coming out that will change Social Security benefits absolutely, categorically, because we know that they have not attempted to, in any realistic way, to save or change Social Security benefits in a way that it would last beyond 2033. Although it will run out of funds and get a 23-ish, 24% reduction probably before that. So to me, the greatest evidence that they already know something's going to come out and change the entire landscape of work, us paying FICA taxes, all that stuff, it has to exist, because none of these politicians are really trying to save it. Now, you could say the Republicans and Democrats just don't give a shit. And to me, that was how it always was. I was just always frustrated. I talk with advisors to these politicians, and the advisors are pissed. But the politicians, especially the higher up ones, they just weren't active with this stuff. So to me, this is the missing piece, the missing link to why we're not trying to do what we can to save Social Security. In fact, every new presidential potential candidate is erasing the rules that were put in place in 1983 and also 1979 to keep the program lasting longer. They're constantly voting away those restrictions those reductions, so that people can get more money faster, more benefits faster, like the Social Security Fairness Act, which is just more evidence to me that they know by the time we hit 2033, that AI is going to be full up and running. Robots are going to be doing a bunch of the functional aspects. Work is probably going to be voluntary, and people are going to be living an extremely long time. So, considering all this, and I guess this is a big question, what is the first technology that you think they will release from either Skunk Works under Lockheed Martin or the legacy program inside the Department of Defense that currently holds these actual biotic beings, these actual physical living things and their ships?
That's a pretty broad brush. What's the first piece of real technology the military industrial complex is going to release that proves unequivocally that it's extraterrestrial? And perhaps they've reverse engineered it because there's nothing else like that out there. That's a difficult one. It's going to have to be something that benefits mankind, womankind, humankind. It's going to have to be something that really, really helps so that people can understand it and know that it benefits them mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially. That's the kind of thing you're going to have to come out with. And it might best be done not as one major thing. It might best be done as a series of smaller things, helping the disabled, for instance. Who in the world would argue with that?
So I guess my big thing is, and I think you make a good point there, is, so let's say, because keep in mind, they got to roll this stuff out over time. They got to make it make sense over time. They can't destroy the oil industry. They can't destroy the medical industry. They can't put every doctor out of business. And it's simple technologies. Like if they had a scanner that could scan your body and figure out any potential and all impairments, any DNA code structure issues, that would take a lot of machine operating medical facility personnel out of work real fast. If they had a magic machine that you could step into, a healing pod, a surgery pod, and they could go ahead and fix things that arose, stage 1 cancers fixed, stage 0 cancers fixed. So, we have the MRI technology now where they can find stage 0 cancers. They were just releasing information that they have a new technical design, I guess it's a cure to some degree for cancer, and they're currently going through the final testing of it. So to me, when I look at this, it's only a matter of time until the disabled are healed. What do you think psychologically that's going to do to the disabled, who are then going to have to go back to work when they've spent the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years of their life knowing themselves, defining themselves as a disabled person? And same question for the retired. They've been out of work for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. How are they going to react to, okay, well, now it's time to go back to work?
Well, there are going to be people who are going to like it, and there are people who are not. And like I said, with every funeral, you get a small change. And those who don't take advantage of it will ultimately die off. And those who do take advantage of it will, in theory, live on. And I just want to make sure that they release things that are very difficult to weaponize. And I know that's the fear. I mean, just imagining what they're going through, having to answer your question, what do you think they're going to release? They don't want something that our adversaries can take advantage of and use against us. And we want them to see that they help mankind, but not weaponize. We're not the friendliest group of people, and we're the worst amongst ourselves. We're like little kids fighting all the time, wars here and there. So it's got to really be something that can be pigeonholed to help the disabled and really make us feel better. We have diseases. Oh my Lord, do we have diseases? We have all these pandemics that's going around the world. There's a lot of things that we can do health-wise, and I would like to really see them use and do that. I suspect that is probably where they're going to go with this. They're going to kick and scream, even if it's a medical thing. They're not going to want to do it for whatever reason because they fear that the enemy will get it and they'll weaponize it against us. So it's a difficult decision, and they themselves may have to ultimately pass generationally in order for the younger group to come up and take over the legacy with perhaps a slightly different view of things.
So, in order to do some of this technology, the big holdback that they were talking about was that there was a lack of power. We didn't have enough power to go ahead and create these distortions in time and space. However, there is basically Zap Seattle Lab, who has now reached electron pressures of 830 megapascals, totaling 1.6 gigapascals, rivaling conditions deep in Earth's mantle or Jupiter's core for heat. They are, in a short period of time, now able to create massive amounts of energy, although it's not totally stable, for a short period of time. And their ability to use basically plasma for these fusion core innovations is probably within the next 2 to 3 years going to be able to create from one of these facilities more power than is used by all humans across the entire planet from a building that would essentially be the size of a Walmart. How, with this new fusion technology, will that change how we interact with this new potential technology? Because, AI takes a lot of energy. You see Elon building all these new, data centers, and the data centers require massive amounts of energy to go ahead and run all those servers. So I guess my question to you is, once we have the power to go ahead and power all this stuff, how will people start to online with this technology that will take them away from the old ways and bring them into the new ways?
Well, you can just imagine these changes. I mean, let's just I'm going back to poor Elon with his Tesla. It gives us 300-mile range now if you're lucky and going downhill. Just imagine a vehicle like that doesn't need to ever be refueled, that can hover, no more tires, no more gasoline. But you got to think how that's going to affect the gasoline industry, the oil industry, hovering, the wheels, the tire industry, how these things are going to affect. I think they're going to be great. I think they're going to come, but you've got to bring them in a structured way. Now, the energy source that they're coming up with, let's just say fusion, and then it'll probably come antimatter, which will be a quantum leap from fusion. That's going to come. And don't forget, we have a huge fusion reactor in our backyard called our sun. That's going to be supplying much more energy now than this ridiculous solar cell thing we have. And even worse are the windmills. I mean, we'll talk about a total complete waste. So the sun is a very, very valuable source of energy. It's going to change the world. Look, I'm 80. I want to live to be 150 minimum. And I love technological change. And we're living at a time right now, like you're going to see a lot of this in the next 4 or 5 years. And I think that's great. Some people will resist it. That's okay. They don't have to partake in it. But like I said before, with generational change comes true change.
So I guess my big thing is China has recently come out with new small box technology that is able to remove from literally space, where we assume there's nothing, but we're actually finding that there are hyper microscopic quantum level particles that are able to take those and create oxygen out of them. And, we've always had things that desalinate. We've always had things that basically would, essentially find a way to create clean water, find a way to create cleaner O2, things like that. Originally in their subs, they were using electrolytic oxygen generators, China's, from their 039A submarines. And so the idea here is, now that they have the means to create oxygen better in space, now that they have that now that they know how the warp bubble technology works for getting us from point A to point B to some degree. Maybe they don't have all the math worked out. How long do you think it will be, before we are able to take a spaceship to go to Mars that only takes maybe a day, maybe a couple of days, as opposed to a much longer period of time? Because, people want to be able to see the stars. People would love to see the farthest planets in our cute little sun-oriented, rotating and spiraling and wiggling up and down existence. So when do you think we'll have that technology?
Well, I think we'll have it a lot sooner if we really, really befriend the ETs, get their technology, and begin releasing it. We could do that. We could probably do that within the next 10 years and really get it into practical use. I mean, the ETs could move this along very quickly. Reverse engineering it takes longer. Creating it ourselves from scratch, although we have it theoretically done now, but you got to get it in the laboratory, you got to do it, then you got to get it out of the laboratory, and you got to make sure it works well. That could be 20 years. But I think with the ET help, you're going to begin seeing a lot of this stuff, certainly out of the laboratory in the next 5 years.
Okay. So to me, somebody who studies Social Security benefits more than most, I mean, I do it every night. Every day, all day, I work with people on it. And then I talk with advisors. I talk with people who are key to the industry. And then I do shows at night. And I guess from my perspective with this whole situation, seeing how the politicians are not doing anything to cure, save, fix the program in a long-term sense, it is doomed to fail. And they're okay with it because they know something that we don't. Although it's starting to come out and make sense as to why they're going this way. So if that's what's going to happen, if we're going to have that technology and we access it, do you feel that retirement benefits will be available to those who reject the technology? And then for those who basically use the technology to live 200 years, 300 years, 400 years, 500 years, they will be stripped of their retirement and basically will have to go on to, well, just some other program, something like that. Because, if you take the money from those who use the technology and give it to those who reject it won't live, they might live to their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 100. But, if you take the money from those people who use the technology to become young again and live a much longer life, would that be, do you feel like a moral or ethical way of handling this?
Well, let me just say this. I don't think our extraterrestrial brothers and sisters, and really they're terrestrial brothers and sisters, I don't think they have a Social Security program for themselves. I just don't think it's needed. I think it would be looked upon as absurd. I think they probably view it as something primitive societies would have. Beyond that, as I've said before, the way this is going is Social Security is not going to run out of money. They're going to run out of customers. Stated another way, they're not going to be needed.
I guess, and this is the thing. Now that we have, we have the ability to measure quantum mechanics now as to how long one quantum particle takes to communicate with another. And it's an incredibly small amount of time measurement. We now have the ability to actually look to creating food from the particles that are around a machine. It can actually generate items from the particles that are around the machine, suck those particles in and create things. So assuming there's a period where humans will still need to eat and we have the machines that can create food for us. I mean, whether it looks like a delicious bagel or not, or maybe it's just a gel that we eat, but assuming that we have to transition through this process where we're still eating, we're still breathing, stuff like that. We now have the machines that can create the air. We now have the machines that can create the food in space, or, for the most part, we're there. So, the food part, we're still working on it. But the point is, do you believe older people or younger people will be the first ones to tap this technology? Because the older people, they're running out of time. They've got a sunset clock on their shoulders. The younger people, They want to go ahead and take advantage of it early, but they also might want to sit back and see what better technology comes out. Who do you feel will be the first to jump on board with it?
Well, I don't think it's a young or an old person thing. I would say this. We as humans will progress. We're kind of primitive in that we have to eat meat, vegetables, drink water, on and on and on. Things that we eat that have gone through many conversions and have lost a lot of energy in those conversions. The sun grows the plants, the animals eat the plants, we eat the animals, and so forth and so forth. That said, we are going to progress to a group that no longer uses food as we know it. We'll go right to the energy source ourselves, being, in our case, the sun. Light. Light will give us the energy we need to progress. We won't be needing food. We won't be needing vegetables, meats, and all that. We'll be needing light, and the light energy will sustain us. And I often heard, I don't know if it's true because I wasn't there, in the 47 Roswell crash, with the one who survived for, I don't know, don't quote me, 6 weeks, whatever it was. They, when he was, or she was getting sick and not doing well, they actually called in a botanist because they don't eat like we do. They don't drink, that kind of thing. They use light energy to get the energy they need to survive. And the light energy is much more efficient than having go through many conversions to eat vegetables and meat. So that is going to change. Now, the young going to go for that? Are the old going to go for that? I think eventually everyone will go for it because, as I've always said, with every change, you need a generational change. And if the old don't go for it, they're going to die off, and then we're talking to younger people. I think it's inevitable, and I think the change is coming. And again, I've said it 1,000 times, with every funeral, you get a little change.
So they now have Commander David Fravor, Lieutenant Commander Alec Dietrich, Lieutenant Ryan Graves, Lieutenant Bob Jacobs, Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet, Colonel Carl Nell, basically a bunch of military pilots. They've also had Luis Elizondo, former director of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP. They also had Jay Stratton, the former director of Pentagon's Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, which is their UAP task force. Christopher Mellon, the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence. James Clapper, former Director of National Intelligence. James Clapper, the former Director of National Intelligence. Chris Miller, former Acting U.S. Secretary of Defense. Jim Semivan, former CIA Management Officer. Marco Rubio, Kirsten Gillibrand, Mike Rounds, Andre Carson, Eric Burleson, Harold Puthoff, Eric Davis. These are all your scientists. Travis Taylor, Gary Nolan. Harold is a quantum physicist, former ATIP chief scientist. Eric Davis, astrophysicist, ATIP scientific advisor. Travis Taylor, quantum physicist, U.S. Army analyst, UAP physics defying maneuvers. Gary Nolan, Stanford professor, former CIA ATIP UAP task force advisor, studied biological effects on UAP witnesses and anomalous materials, because apparently when people got too close to the bubble around the ships, it burned them. So I guess my question to you is, we've heard from the scientists, we've heard from the military personnel, we've heard from the aircraft, the people who flew the aircraft, we've heard from the politicians, we've heard from the directors. Who are we likely to hear from next? Will it be the legacy program personnel?
Who's going to come next? Well, I guess it's getting time for the guy called Donald Trump to start figuring out what he's going to be doing. And I kind of think we're getting there where an announcement's going to have to be made. He's going to have the science community with him. He's going to have the religious community with him. He's going to have a lot of people. And it would be monumentally persuasive to have an ET there as well. But we're rapidly getting to that time, and it's got to come from him. He's going to have to do it. We all know it exists. We swept it under the carpet. We got an elephant under the carpet now. It's time, and he's going to have to recognize that too. But he's going to have to control it very, very carefully so it doesn't disrupt too many industries too quick. And, people are going to have to come to accept it. I think a lot have. A lot will reject it. A lot will ridicule and on and on. You'll get into the political thing. That's there. But I think it's getting to be time where let's start doing this, and let's take a look at the legacy folks, and let's ferret out the material that can help mankind, the disabled, that kind of thing, and not necessarily be weaponized, because I'm sure there's a barrel of stuff there that can be weaponized. And he who comes out with that first is going to be controlling the world for the next 100 years. So we don't need that. We don't need that. But we certainly could use help physically with ourselves. That would be a good place to start with. And I think that would be viewed very well, and it should be.
So, and I guess this is my question, my final question to you is the following. So we used to think, because of the anti-information, disinformation programs, that basically people were insane if they believed in aliens. We go all the way back to when people thought they were the center of the universe. Now we know we're not the center of the universe. People who think we are, they are insane, or they're just very misinformed. We now know that we're not alone, that we're not the only sentient beings in the universe. And we now know that people who think we are just, again, misinformed or insane. At what point in America where will people have a stigma towards those who don't believe in this stuff? At what point will it shift? Because the shift is happening right now, but at what point will it shift where everybody looks at the people who believe there's nothing else, there's no sentient beings in the universe? At what point will we look at them and say, how could these people really think that? At what point, honestly, as I say this, I'm thinking about political stuff, like some of the stuff that I've seen coming out of the woke side. I'm just like, I sit there, I'm just like, how could this person believe this? How could they be this misinformed? At what point will the stigma flip to the other side where people ridicule those who don't believe?
Well, that's probably happening already. We're seeing that, the fact that they're coming out with this, the believers in it are not being ridiculed anymore. That seems to have gone by the wayside, and it's an adjustment process for people. There are always going to be those who won't accept it. It doesn't fit their scheme of things, this, that, and the other thing. I remember one time I had a conversation with someone. I talked about reincarnation, and there was a lady, and she looked at me and said, "Oh, my religion won't allow me to believe that." And you're always going to get that, and that's fine. And I'm not picking on the religious folks, please. I'm just picking on people who just refuse to believe it. There's an ego problem here, that we're the center of the universe, we're this, we're that. It's the way we grew up. And when you go back and you think about your teaching in school, grade school, high school, and all that, I mean, none of this, just, the idea of people coming here from other worlds. I can remember my father telling me, the distances are just too great. It takes too long, on and on and on. And, that's the old time, speed, and distance routine, which we know doesn't hold water anymore, but that's what they grew up with, and that's what they believe. And, it's the old thing. You can't teach old dogs new tricks. That, hey, I'm 80 years old, but I love technology. But some people, you're not going to get them to swing over. And that's okay. That's fine. You don't want to jam anything down anyone's throat, because the younger crowd coming up, we all know they believe it. They know they're here. They're probably commingling with us. They hybridize with us. We're them. They're us. It's not extraterrestrials, foreign technology. No, it's just something we have to get used to. And seeing an ET, having Trump come on TV with one would blow the socks off a lot of people. I would admit that. But maybe we need that.
Yeah, and I mean, so for me, this first step is when you get literally the government personnel at the outer layer of this stuff, and it's not really even the outer layer. I guess an outer layer would be people, I don't know, from an agency that didn't make sense, to this topic, giving information about it. We didn't have that. We had government hearings to extract information out of Pentagon officials, military pilots, directors of the CIA programs, directors of the defense programs. And it all led back to one that we don't have access to yet or hasn't been released yet, which is the legacy program. So to me, I think at this point, what we're running into is a situation where the next thing that will likely come out is that they will bring forth, under the threat of being arrested, those in the legacy program to give testimony. Once those people give testimony, the next thing would be to go ahead and show people what they know. Now, do I think that they're going to always reserve things? Yes, because every time we release information about technology we have that is beyond what's currently in use, it creates a problem. I think also, it's a situation where, when I go back and look at essentially these, movies, right? About aliens, Men in Black, right? One of the first things Men in Black did was they had an alien interaction with a device that was put in space that protected the Earth as like a dome, protected the Earth from potential harms that could occur to it. It would be able to sense spaceships that were far, far out. We wouldn't have to look for them, it would just sense them. It would be able to go ahead and interact with our technology to send our technology at those potential problems. And that was the theme. That was the background of the Men in Black. That was the first technology that we really received in those movies from, these alien beings. At the same time, there has been somewhat recently released the Golden Dome for America, revolutionizing U.S. Homeland Missile Defense system, a grid system where they're talking about, and I quote, Golden Dome stands as a layered defense shield safeguarding the American homeland with unwavering precision, ensuring the security and resilience of our nation. Golden Dome for America is a revolutionary concept to further the goals of peace through strength in President Trump's vision for deterring adversaries from attacks on the homeland. Basically, they're trying to figure out how to create all kinds of layers of attack weaponry, shield technology, etc., to protect America. This is all coming out of Lockheed Martin, one of the number one groups that holds a majority of technology that was sent over from the US government as a part of the legacy program from crashed ships. So I think the reason we're seeing this is because, similar to those Men in Black movies, which the themes came out back then, we are going to integrate a shield system that will protect America and potentially even the Earth if we get to that point from other potential problems. Because, at the end of the day, if we can do that, we can keep other potential, biological beings and their ships off of Earth, which, considering, we're not really a threat to them now, but we are moving at a very quick pace and we are figuring out their technology, we might be in the future. But I think what's interesting about this video is that it allows people to scream, how dare the government do this? How could this be happening? Oh my goodness. But, those are all initial knee-jerk reactions. That's all human shit. That's all humans reacting to something that they're afraid of. And I think what's beautiful about this is that we are moving forward past those primal, I hate this, instinctual existence, feelings. And we're getting more towards, okay, how will we use this in the future? And that's a beautiful thing, because at the end of the day, if you take a disabled person and you can cure them or create an avatar that they can move their mind into, I think most disabled people would choose to have a body, younger, faster, better, not disabled, than to exist in their current body. Although the older disabled would very likely also choose, for religious purposes or otherwise, to remain in their disabled body until they pass away. So I think there will be a class existence between those who live for the standard human lifetime and those who live for a very, very long time who are modified. But again, this is all happening right now. If this all seems weird and out of nowhere for you, please start researching. Just go watch the movie. It's The Age of Disclosure. It's something that you can check out on Amazon Prime. It's other places as well where you can go ahead and check it. I think it's other places, but the bottom line is, go. If you don't want to watch the whole movie, just look up on YouTube the hearings. They're up there, so you will get to see what's going on. Anyways, and just to answer Kosher's thing, he says, back to economic impossibility, even of technological possibility. Yeah, here's my joust with that situation. Economics, for us to travel to some, let's say, I don't know, whatever, some big rock out there that has tons of diamonds in it, tons of copper in it, tons of silver in it, tons of gold in it, tons of whatever in it, platinum, and then be able to mine it, or grab it and bring it closer to the earth and then be able to mine it for our use, instantly changes the economic marketplace of why we would do something like that. There's a lot of reasons to get away from Earth. And the one people usually say is, well, maybe Earth isn't going to be there one day. Yeah, well, that's low on the list. The reason we really want to get away from Earth is we want to study black holes. We want to get access to raw materials on other planets. And we want to set up home bases on other places to further evolve the potential of the human race's existence for the next 1,000, 5,000, 20,000, 100,000 years. So anyways, I'll catch you all a little bit later. You have a wonderful, wonderful night. Attorney Walter Hnot, please have a wonderful and safe upcoming Monday. Nobody's really excited about Monday. And we will rock and roll from there. Please remember to like and subscribe and be nice to each other. I'll catch you all later, and we will go from there. And thank you so much for being a part of this stream. Thank you so much, everybody. All right, bye-bye, everybody.
Enjoy.
Bye-bye.